you, and welcome for coming this evening. My name's Kim Kleiner, and I am co-chair of the National League of Women Voters with my good friend Gwen Mikhailoff. We thank you very much for attending tonight. We thank our candidates for attending the forum, the Nashua Public Library for hosting this and all of our forums this fall, and the Nashua Telegraph for sponsoring it along with us. So we're anxious to get started, and we thank you for coming out on this rainy night. Ben Tolerski, our student from Nashua High School South, is going to lead us in the pledge this evening.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, we're very privileged to have Liz Tetrazelli come down from the State League of Women Voters. She's the president of the State League, and she'll be the moderator for this forum. Liz, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I think we're going to have a wonderful time today. Many of you probably have questions. We're taking written questions. If you have a card with a question written out, would you please hold it up, and our student volunteers are going to come and collect those. If you didn't write one yet, but you get inspired later, just do the same thing. We probably won't get to answer all the audience questions, and we did have some prepared ahead of time, but we'll get to as many as we can without going to midnight, I promise. Thank you. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We never support or oppose any candidate or any party, but we do seek to get out the vote, to get more people involved in voting, and to be better informed about the issues. So this series of forums is exactly in that spirit of being better informed about the issues and about the candidates. The candidates have all submitted little bios, and if you didn't pick up that booklet when you came in, do pick it up on your way out. There are also sample ballots for each of the wards so that you can have your whole cheat sheet done ahead of time before you even get to the polls and check off who you want to vote for. So do pick up those materials. We're very proud of the Nashua unit for doing all the work of these forums. The candidates by lot decided who's going to do the opening statement first and the closing statement. They will be timed, and just so that everybody sees how that works, I'm going to explain it. They have 2 minutes for their opening statement. When we get down to a minute and a half, that is 30 seconds left, we will demonstrate, please. Hold it up. Thank you. So the candidates will know they have 30 seconds left. You're going to hold it long enough that they can see that you're holding it. Thank you. Okay. And then when we get to the end of the time limit, we'll hold up the stop sign and just finish your sentence. Don't keep expanding it, though. Okay? And then we'll move on. The candidates also have little cards, green, red, and white cards, that they can use if they want to answer a question that is not addressed to them. In order to keep interest high and not hear the 8 answers to one question, I'm going to ask a question of 3 candidates. And if one of the other candidates wants to answer that question, they get to hold up one of these colored cards. They can only do it 3 times in the evening. Keep track, okay? That's why they're colored and numbered. All right, with all that behind us, we're going to begin with opening statements, and by the luck of the draw, Sandra Ziem is going first.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'd call it luck, but can you hear me now? That was better?
There we go, yes.
Whoever did that, thank you. Again, my name is Sandra Ziem, and most of you probably know I've been on the school board. This will be my 12th year. It's been a privilege and an honor. Whatever happens, it's an experience that I will never forget. Most especially, I will never forget the kids. Always, my heart intent has been to serve the kids and serve them well. We have a diverse, very diverse population in our schools, and the schools are so different than they were in our generation, assuming that all of you are old. I am, of course. And in our generation, well, for instance, we have washers and dryers in our schools today. In my generation, there were no washers and dryers. So, and I think it's a reflection of the diversity of our nation. It's a reflection of where we are. And so it's taken me most of these 12 years to wrap my arms around our district, to know our district. For instance, we have approximately 13,000 kids. And in that 13,000 kids, you have from the child who comes to school tired and hungry and anxiety-ridden, and that child, is it more difficult to reach a child who lives in poverty? I would suggest to you it's much more difficult. And then you go to the advanced learner who brings hope for tomorrow, and all in the middle there are other kids. And that's been the joy. That has been the joy, but it has not come without challenges. It's not always easy. You make a decision, and then people come and talk to you, and sometimes you change your mind, because I will tell you that with privatization, that was one of the issues that I did change my mind somewhat, because when people came and said to me, I will lose my home, I couldn't help. I'm a human being. I couldn't help but feel, how would I feel if I was going to lose my home? The stress that would bring on a family, to the kids in that home, to mother and daddy and grandma and grandpa. So it has not been without its challenges. But I think that the time that I've had, it's stop. It was nice talking to you folks.
Mr. Farrington.
My name is George Farrington. Over 45 years ago, I came as close as I've ever come to winning a lottery. Unfortunately, that lottery was the first draft lottery, and so that decided my future in the short term and in the long term, as it turned out. I went into the Air Force when I graduated, pilot training, a trip to Vietnam, came back as an instructor pilot for a while, and then became a pilot for American Airlines, from where I retired. My wife and I moved here 40 years ago. We have 4 children who've been through the public system, and now we have 3 grandchildren who are in the elementary schools. In the mid to late 90s, I spent 8 years on the Board of Education. I learned an awful lot about the school district and about education. And then I stepped away for a while. I did a couple years on the Board of Assessors, but 4 years ago I decided to come back, because this is where my interest lies. This is where I think I can provide some guidance and some value, and this is a very important job that we have to do. Going forward, I think that there are 3 things that I would focus on right now because of the time. First, we are trying to, and we need to put all of our efforts into trying to get as many students as possible at the 3rd grade level reading and doing math on grade level. We need to have our students to have a common foundation for their education if they're going to be successful going forward. We need to do a better job of informing our students, middle school and high school students, about the opportunities that are available to them in technical education. There are great career opportunities out there, and we need to do a better job making that connection. And finally, the Board of Education itself. My own view is that the board spends way too much time managing and being involved in the day-to-day operation of the district for which we hire people. I would like to see the board become much more focused on goal setting, doing the kinds of things that need to do, developing policies, and then overseeing and looking at the data and making sure the district is following along and making progress towards those goals.
Thank you. Mr. Raymond Guarino.
Hi, my name is Raymond Guarino. I live in Ward 7. I have a daughter who is currently at Nashua High South. My son just graduated from Nashua High South. I'm active in the community. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. I'm a former coach for the Nashua Youth Soccer League. And I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in urban planning from UMass in Boston, and a background in traffic and transportation. What I believe that the Board of Education, its main mission is to be a staunch advocate for public schools, and we do that by valuing our teachers and our professional educators. We do that by valuing the legacy of our public schools, which have been passed down from our fathers, grandfathers, generations. And we have walking schools that serve the neighborhoods, and we want to keep those and pass those down to our children. So that's why I'm running for Board of Education. We have a lot of issues. We have privatization. I'm against privatization of the custodians. We have, for example, next generation science standards. That shouldn't be controversial. We shouldn't have so much controversy on the board. We should be able to do these things in a nonpartisan, non-political manner. So I hope you consider me November 7th. Thanks.
Thank you. Burton Jantz?
My name is Bert Jans. I'm sure you're going to be able to hear me because I will project so you can. And the reason that I can project is that I was an adjunct instructor at Daniel Webster College for 11 years. So I know what it's like to be in the classroom. I know what it's like to teach students. My wife and I moved to Nashua in 1982 after I had been discharged from 10 years of Navy service. We raised 2 children here. Both children went all the way through the school system, which I thought was a very good school system, although there were a couple of issues that we might address later. One of the reasons that I am running is because I think we need to become, on the school board, we need to become more student-centric. We need to pay more attention to what's happening in the classroom, more attention to our students' education, and more attention to preparing them for the 21st century. We had a student forum at the high school on Tuesday. One of the students came up to me and told me that we're still using a history book that has George Bush as the president. That's shameful. We need to start using 21st century technology, 21st century ebooks. We need to start using electronic materials in the classroom to assist the teachers to help them present materials to the students that will help prepare them for their future lives in the 21st century. Whether they go to college prep or whether they decide they want a degree in technical, that's fine. And just so you know, I am a programmer, self-taught. I taught myself in the Navy. So I know other people can learn this as well. Those are the technologies that are going to bring us forward into the 21st century.
Thank you. Dottie Oden?
Hi, I'm a retired teacher from Nashua. I have 25 years' experience in the classroom. My first 10 years were in Connecticut. We moved to Nashua. We moved to Massachusetts first and then moved to Nashua. And I had the advantage of being a staying-at-home mom. When I went back into education, I went back as a para at Amherst Street School for a year and a half. And then I had the good fortune to get a teaching position at Amherst Street School and spent 14 wonderful years there. I think my experience and my education give me a lot of knowledge and experience that helps on the Board of Education. I had not planned to run. I had announced that publicly, but when we hired the new superintendent, Dr. Mosley, and I looked at the front page of the Telegraph and I saw where a sitting board member and another member of the board said that we got it wrong when we hired him. I had to rethink my position of not running. I think we hired the right person. I know we hired the right person, and I would like to be there to support him. He's very student-oriented. Matter of fact, we had a forum at the high school the other day, and he was in the control room with our students. So he would like to build a strategic plan here in Nashua. He said that during his interview, and I would like to be part of that process. I hope you can return me to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. And Heather Raymond.
Thank you. I'm Heather Raymond. I moved here to Nashua in 2010 with my family. I've spent my entire career helping children and their families. I was a child protective social worker for 12 years. I started in upstate New York as an investigator, and I spent the last 7 years here in Nashua. One of the unique things about working in child protection is that you get to know the communities where you work very well. I've been in all of Nashua's schools, and we have a lot of schools. We have 12 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 2 high schools, and Clearway Alternative High School, and each one has its own unique attributes and its own unique needs. Each of those schools have students with their own unique needs and their own unique programs. Over the years, I've participated in countless IEP meetings, court hearings, and other school-related activities while advocating for the children that I've worked with. I've also become very familiar with Nashua's community service organizations and how they interact with the schools. I love Nashua. My family and I have chosen to move here and raise our children here. We're homeowners, and one of my favorite things about being here is the diversity that I see every day. I love the fact that my kids have a more vast experience with diversity than I do. Since I left DCYF earlier this year, I've learned that serving others is an essential part of who I am. I've been volunteering, but I'd like to do more. I felt called to run for the Board of Education because I want to ensure that not just my own children, but all of Nashua's children receive a high-quality public education. For me, public education is the foundation on which the American dream is built, and we can do better for all of our kids. To do this, we need teachers with adequate resources. We need curriculum and educational practices that are up-to-date and evidence-based, and we need to make sure that our tax dollars are being used appropriately.
Thank you. Jamila Scales.
Yes, hi, my name is Jamila Scales, and I'm running for the Board of Education. I've been in Nashua for over 28 years. I have two children in the Nashua Public Schools currently. My oldest did graduate Nashua North. He got a great education and went on to college. I enjoy working in the Nashua School District currently as a paraprofessional and a substitute teacher. I've learned quite a bit from being a substitute teacher and a paraprofessional. One, that there are several different needs within the school district, which means we need to pay more attention to our children in the way that they learn. If you ever have any question about that, go to any classroom. There are several different levels of learning in our school district, and all of our teachers are challenged with the challenge of educating each and every last one of the children in their class, whether there's 25 children or 30. They do a remarkable job, but of course, it does not come without sometimes difficulty. For that reason, our teachers many times have to show the aptitude, they have to show their educational fortitude and their experience to handle the classroom. From sub-teaching and paraprofessional work, I realized that our students need to be the core, they need to be the foundation, they need to be the focus, the complete focus of the Board of Education. At all times, whenever decisions are made, they need to be made with our children in mind, at the forefront of our minds, not just mine, but yours as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gloria Timmons.
Hey, I get to go last. Okay. My name is Gloria Timmons, and I'm a retired veteran and also retired for the Assistant Director of the Department of Employment Security in Nashua. I moved here in 1990. During the time I moved here, I raised my 3 kids, plus I had other kids in the school system, and now I have 16 grandchildren. That's the main reason why I'm running for the Board of Education. My children, 8 of them are currently in the school system as we speak. I wouldn't like to say pro, because that's not a good word. But I am for public education, okay? And I'm also for custodians staying in our school system because I know what's going on in the school system. My kids tell me what's going on in the school system. I hear what they say every day. They tell me about the chairs in the school system, that they have to go into the classroom and have to look and see if the chair is broken or not before they sit down. I think that's a shame that they have to do that. The teachers are great in Nashua. My kids came out of Nashua with great public education. They went to school, they all educated, they all went to good colleges, and that's what I want to see in the school system now. I'm here for a reason. I'm a collaborator, I'm a uniter, and I believe that putting me in with the Board of Education will help all our children, not just my grandchildren, but all the children in the Nashua Public School System. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I remind you, if you have a question that you've written on a card, just hold it up. Our students will come around. I see one in this row, Ben. I'm not sure how he's going to get to you. Maybe we can hand it down. Thank you. All right, our first question, as I said, I'm going to ask most of these questions of three of the people. If others want to chime in, they have their bonus cards. What do you see as the primary work of the Board of Education? And we started with Ms. Zeem, so we're up to Mr. Farrington. You're starting on this one, sir.
Oh, pick up where I left off.
Yes.
To me, the purpose of the board is to represent the community in how our schools are run. The board should be there to, as I said earlier, to be developing strategic plans, goals for the district, as I mentioned, the third grade goal, or defining a particular increase in student performance, or dropout rates, or things like that. And then we step back and we convey that to the administration, and they run the schools on a day-to-day basis. We monitor the data, we look at the input from the district, and make sure we are either attaining those goals and objectives, or we ask the difficult questions as to why. If it's a question of resources, we get involved and maybe reallocate resources, as we did to provide kindergarten for the 7 of our schools this year. But it's an oversight position is the way I see the board should be operated.
Thank you. Mr. Guarino, do you have a different view on the role of the Board of Education, the primary purpose of it?
I believe the primary mission is to be an advocate for our public schools. And of course, we represent, as Mr. Farrington said, we represent the people, people's investment in our schools. You know, it goes beyond just contracts and negotiating contracts. It's about courses of study. It's about supporting our teachers and giving them the resources, giving them the professional development. That's a big issue. And making sure that we program our schools for success. Because nothing speaks to community more than our public schools. You know, it brings people together. Friendships last a lifetime. Friendships that are made in the school last a lifetime. So it's important to our community.
Thank you. Mr. Jans, what do you see as the primary work of the Board of Education?
Well, I think Mr. Farrington and Mr. Guarino have made very good points, but I'd like to add on, if I could, that the Board of Education needs to be, as they have said, an advocate for schools, but I believe it also needs to be an advocate for the community and for the parents. And most importantly, it needs to advocate for the students. We're here for the students. That's what the schools exist for. Now, we have some of the best teachers in the state here in Nashua. As the Board of Education, can we help the teachers and empower them in the classroom to give them the materials they need, to give them the freedom that they need to be able to do a better job of educating the kids? That's why we're here. We're here for the children. And I think that we need to be an advocate for the children. We have a great public school system here in Nashua. That's already been established. I think we need to work towards representation of the parents and the kids.
Thank you. Playing on what the three of you said is the next question. How can the school board be accessible and responsive to the community while staying focused on big picture policy issues such as student achievement? Ms. Oden, would you like to start with that one?
I think you have to be accessible and listen to the people and listen to the teachers. That's important because the teachers are in the trenches every day with our kids, and that's what we're all here for. And I think as far as the community, when they have issues, I certainly, I call them back. If there's a problem, I know people have approached me in the grocery store, and I think you have to listen, and then you bring that information, whatever you have, back to administration and place that in their lap and let them solve the problem, and then you follow up on it. And what I try to do, I know we get a lot of emails when there are important issues in the school district. We get a lot of emails from teachers and parents, and I always try to respond to those emails and to those people to let them know that I've heard them. And as far as trying to go along with the big issues, I try to prioritize and attack them that way, and always try to be prepared for meetings so that I know what I want to advocate for. Thank you.
Ms. Raymond, what about you? How would you combine this balance of being responsive and the big picture goals?
So I think I think what Mrs. Oden said about the board already being good at listening to the community during the board hearings. I think in general, we've been doing a great job. I think usually there is a public portion. And the meetings I've been to, they've been very receptive to allowing people to have their say, and also to be responsive with email. I'd also like to see a little bit more outreach from the board towards some of our more marginalized communities who aren't able to make a meeting, or who maybe aren't able to access the internet to email the board. There are a number of committees already in the city that reach out to some of our more marginalized groups, like the Committee for Cultural Connections, for example. It would be great to see a member of the school board participate in some of those, especially as that population continues to grow. I think prioritizing is a big issue. We need to decide what our strategic vision is and then pursue policies that are in line with that strategic vision and not necessarily get lost in the weeds of initiatives all the time.
Ms. Scales, how do you see the board being both responsive and keeping its eye on the big picture policies?
For me, I believe the board could be more responsive by doing just as what some of my constituents just said, responding to emails, also going to the school district to observe for themselves. I think that's very important because I believe that if you're going to represent the students, then you need to see for yourself what's happening, not just receive feedback because your perception may be different and the student's perception may be different. I believe that the board also needs to listen to the students because that's who we're serving, and to the teachers as well. I think outside of that, emails, Facebook is another way to receive information and serve. The big picture is our students. The big picture is our education. As of right now, our reading levels have decreased significantly over the last 4 years. We need to increase that, and by doing that, we will put our Nashua, our city, to the forefront again. Our reading is important for success. Our math levels have decreased as well. We need to bring them up. We need to increase our math levels amongst our students. And again, this can be done by communication. It can be done by excellent teachers, which we have, and it can be done by remembering that our students and their needs are most important.
All right, one more question, then we'll get to some that our students are holding up there that they've gathered. And that is, what is the best way to, I'm sorry, I didn't see your card. Thank you, please, Ms. Timmons.
I'd like to add something I think is very important, transparency. Transparency is very important. We need to see what the board is doing. Not what you want, not what the board wants you to hear, but what they're actually doing. I tried to find things out, and I could not. And then I did have some meetings with some board members, and they showed me things that I should be able to just go on the school board and find that information. And I find that the board wasn't as transparent as you believe it may be. If I win, it's gonna be transparent. You should know what's going on in the school district at all times. They're your children, and you should know what's going on with your children. And if any issues arise with the board, you should know that as well. It should not be a secret, and that is my pet peeve. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and so we're going to have one more question. What's the best way to address differences of opinion on the board or between the board and the administration? And Ms. Timmons, you were up first for that.
Thank you.
So there you go.
Okay, right on time. Yes, everybody have a difference of opinion. I have a difference of opinion, but having a difference of opinion does not mean that you're right. That means that you have a difference of opinion. And you know how opinions are. So that's everybody's opinion should be accepted and thought on and not dismissed. That's where the transparency come in. So your opinion may be different from what your own experience is. Life experiences make you different, and I need a glass of water or something because my mouth is drying out. But that's the difference, is that opinions is just that, opinions.
Ms. Ziem, you've been on the board. Would you have advice for handling differences of opinion, perhaps a little bit differently?
Well, I would say some differently, although her points are well taken. You can hear me. That's that southern drawl, too. That might make it a little difficult. I'll try to stop.
That's good.
That's
good.
too.
If you lean in.
Lean in, okay.
That's perfect.
I find that it is in our differences that we have strength. If I can civilly say to you why I disagree with you and not offend you, and then you in turn can disagree with me without offending me, now we've both come to a higher level. We both know more about the issue, and we both understand each other. We don't have caustic to each other, we have more respect. And as a result, we're building a bridge, not a roadblock. And so when I first went on the board, when I would come to the meeting and I'd be sitting in the car ready to go in, I would say to myself, now remember, Sandra, that whatever you have to say it nicely. And if you can't say it nicely, then shut up. Don't open your big mouth and make yourself look bad. So that has always been my policy. That's always what I've tried to do. And it's what I would continue. Don't always make it. I admit it. Sometimes I stumble, but that will always be my goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Farrington, what about you? And then I'll get to the person who raised a card. Yes.
Okay, excuse me. I agree, perhaps surprisingly to some of you, that difference of opinion is important. I think that through difference of opinion, we arrive at a better solution in the long run. But I think on the board, what we find often is we have a conversation, we have a difference of opinion, there's a vote taken, a decision's made, and then the board should move on. But frequently, the board doesn't. The board goes back and rehashes it. The same subject by the supporter is brought up in a slightly different language or something like that. And that is what wears you down when you're on the board. It's the constant rehashing of something. You have to, when you're on a board, you have to be able to listen to different opinions, but you also have to learn to accept when you come out on the short end of the vote and move on to the next topic. And that's part of it. It's not just a difference of opinion.
Thank you. And there was a card. Yes, Ms. Oden.
Yes. Anybody who's watched the Board of Education meetings or has attended any know that they can be very contentious. Unfortunately, you are going to have differences of opinion, but as long as you show respect for the people that have a difference with you and are willing to listen to them, it goes a long ways. We don't need all the contentiousness on the board that has been happening. I sometimes feel that there's pushback more from, because of the person who's saying something rather than the idea that's coming from them. But I also agree that there are times when you've made a decision and you have to move on. There are times sometimes when you have to revisit it, but to keep rehashing it does no good. We have to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to comment on that? Ben, do you have our first question? We have several students from Nashua High South here who are working with the League on this entire forum, and they're going to be reading some of the audience questions.
Do you think that our schools have a role to play in the prevention and/or treatment of opioid use?
And first up for that is Mr. Guarino.
Well, most definitely, substance abuse is a problem. It can start in our young people. And we have to get our young people connected to not just their studies, but socially. We have to get them connected socially and not feel like they're outcast when kids have fun, they can have a lot of fun without substance abuse or something like that. So most definitely we should start in our schools.
Mr. Jans, do you have some ideas on that?
When I was in the Navy, I was appointed as a Naval Drug Exemption Representative. So I received training in opioid and other drug abuse. And what I learned was that it's not the drugs themselves, it's the environment in which the individual exists that is using the drugs. I also have some friends. One friend's son was a heroin addict. He has now left. He's no longer on heroin, and that's because his environment changed. He was able to move away from the drug by changing the people that he was associating with, by changing the environment, and by getting additional assistance. There are a lot of people that want help. That's what I found out when I was a DER, that there are people that want to change their lives. We need to be able to give them an opportunity to do it, but we can't push them into it. And what schools, the part that schools can play here is to teach our students what the effect of drugs on the body is, what happens when you use them, and how it will affect you physically and mentally. Once they understand that, and we can get them out of the environment that they are in with some friends that might not be beneficial, I think we'll see very positive results.
Thank you. Ms. Oden, what do you see as the school's role in preventing treatment of opioid use?
I think that, sorry, I think our schools realize they have an importance in educating our students about the harms of drugs. If I'm not wrong, this is Red Ribbon Week, and that is closely associated with the drug problem. So we understand, and the school district, I think, has a pretty good health program that is addressing this. The problem is we have a lot of students, as I said, I worked at one of our Title I schools, who see a lot of drug use in their home, in their neighborhood, and I think the more they hear about the harms of that, they see it. So we have to teach them other strategies and other ways to address their needs other than taking drugs, and let them understand that this is not the only way you live life. So I think our schools are doing a good job with that at this point.
Ms. Ziem, you were raising your card.
I have a very strong feeling that we not only need to be more involved, but at a younger age. You can't start with a child when they're 12, 13 and try to change who they are. You have to start when they're 5 and 6, when they're young and tender, and you can still mold their thinking. Much as in the old days when so many of us were smoking, who have now gotten on the wagon and know that it's detrimental to your health, and most of us have stopped. And that's because of the program that we put forward. It was on TV. There were ads all over the place. I remember teaching the kids in Sunday school. I got a film from the Lung Association. It was a scary film, and at the time I thought, I'm going to scare these kids to death. But 10 years later, one of those young kids came back to me and thanked me and said, "I've never put a cigarette in my mouth, Mrs. Ziem, because I remember that nasty film." And it was reassuring to me because I was concerned that it was too young. I don't think it's too young. I truly believe that to do it right, we're going to have to start young, and we're going to have resources, which we have not had.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Scales first, and then I'll get to you. Yes.
I believe the schools can absolutely do more. First is identifying identification. Children who do show those signs and symptoms really, they can absolutely report it or have that conversation. I believe exactly what Mrs. Ziem said, that you can't start when they're teens, and research does show that you shouldn't. There's many different situations where there's children who actually have conversations with us as paras or teachers, and I'm sure Mrs. Oden can probably attest to this, that they come to school and they tell us about things that are occurring either in the home or on the street or where they go to visit. Okay, so we absolutely have that opportunity to speak and to advise and to counsel, which I take every opportunity I can get, I will tell you that. Every time I hear a child make that statement or a statement regarding drugs, to explain it to them on their level so that they can look away from it and say no.
Ms. Raymond, your card was up.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think it's a bit naive to think that telling kids about the effect of drugs is going to stop them from using drugs. They tried that with Just Say No and DARE, and it was not very successful. Our kids in Nashua are seeing their family members die all the time from opiates. I've seen it. I've talked to those kids after a parent has died. They know what it is. They know what it does to their bodies. But I think there's more. School needs to be, first and foremost, a safe place for our kids. And secondly, I'd like to see some partnerships. Maybe we should talk to Keystone. What does Keystone have to say? What does the Youth Council have to say about effective ways to help kids with the drug issues, especially when it comes to opiates, because it becomes addictive so quickly?
And Mr. Farrington, you have your card. This is a good question. Mr. Farrington?
How much time does this buy me?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. This is a tragedy. I mean, we all understand this. I think 3 years ago, the previous mayor had a day-long seminar that I attended, and prior to going that, I visited some of our schools to talk to our guidance counselors to have a better understanding of what was going on. And I think we need to understand, obviously, the immediate effect, but there's a secondary effect that happens in a lot of families. Young children are going home to houses that are empty because their parents are not there. They're out using drugs. Older children are being expected to go out and work so that they can earn enough money to come home and put food on the table because the parents are spending all the money for drugs. And I will tell you that 3 years, I believe it was 3 years ago, I made the motion on the board, and we now have Narcan in our schools. It's not the kind of thing that we want to do, but it's a kind of proactive, I think. If we're going to have defibrillators, in this day and age, we have to have Narcan also. So we need to be proactive in that regard, but we also have to understand the secondary effect that's happening to a lot of our students who aren't directly using the drug but are being impacted by it.
Thank you. And did someone, yes?
I just want to point out something. Drugs is not just for the lower economic status. It's across the board. Every one of us in here probably knows someone or know of someone that's been using drugs. So to be naive to think it's only in the lower economic status of the population, it is not. All of us know someone that has been using drugs or on drugs currently as we speak. So I just want to point that out. So it's a misclaim if you think it's just the lower economics. It's straight across the board in every race and every culture. Thank you.
One of the, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Scales.
I just wanted to take a moment to agree with Ms. Timmons, and it is not just the lower class, or however you want to put it, or the children in poverty that make those statements to me. They are not. These children that are making statements are parents who are doctors and lawyers. So please do not be as naive to think that for one moment these children are simply from one, the tree streets, or two, a lower class neighborhood. They're not. So I just needed to point that out and let you know up front that is not the case.
Thank you. Obviously, all of you, if elected, would pay serious attention to this. Some cities have said that if they can provide more extracurricular activity for students, it helps with this problem because students build relationships with coaches, whether they're athletic coaches or the drama coach, that even the time spent in those group activities is very positive to combat the temptation of drug use, and they're not running home to homes that have problems. Therefore, the question is, would you support greater funding of extracurricular activities for students, keeping in mind that it has that carryover effect, possibly, on reducing drug use or drug involvement? And I think we're up to Ms. Raymond for taking that one first.
In general, I would say yes. I think it's important for us to have a wide variety of extracurricular activities for a number of reasons. I think it's important for us to give our kids a chance to find out what they're good at, find out their talent, find out what they're interested in. Nashua does a great job, actually, already with music and art and athletics, but I would love to see that continue. Having said that, our budget is tight. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to have a strategic goal and make sure that our budget and what we're paying for is in line with the strategic goal. And maybe that means that we can't have everything the first year. Maybe we need to streamline first and then figure out the next steps. I would hate to come up here and say, yes, let's do this, and let's do that, and yes, do that, and then go look at the budget and be like, oh my gosh, we don't have any extra money. So I think that we have to be targeted, but making sure that extracurriculars are a part of that equation. We can't cut them in favor of other things.
Ms. Scales?
My opinion is basically the same as hers. I don't think that we can make that determination here and now. We do need to look at the budget and then assess it, and then come up with a determination as to what we can afford as a district, as the board. So I'm going to have to agree with Mrs. Raymond with that.
It's okay if you agree with each other.
Totally.
Ms. Timmons?
Absolutely, I think we need extracurricular activities for these children. That's why we started the Arlington Street Community Center, for that particular reason. We have to have a place for these kids to do and where to go. So we need that, and if we don't have the money, we need a way to find that money. And we can find that money in all sorts of ways. It's not necessarily out of the taxpayers' pocket, but I know ways to raise money to have extracurricular activities in the school or after-school program and community centers to help our children get the things that they need. So it's naive to think that our money is the only way to get this stuff done. It's other ways that we can have that done as well. And that's why we're doing the Arlington Street Community Center, that we will actually have a Halloween party Saturday for kids ages 0 to 18, 3 to 6. So come and see what we're doing, and that's part of the things that we want to do to make sure that we have a positive school system, a positive Nashua, and a positive education for all our children. Thank you for that 30 seconds.
Okay, and we've got another question from the audience that Margaret will read to us.
Where do you stand on privatization of custodians?
Good question. No, we're holding applause, thank you. Read it again slowly.
Where do you stand on privatization of custodians?
Thank you. And Ms. Ziem, you're up for that one.
I started my comments talking about privatization. It's an emotional topic because these are our neighbors. These are people that go to church with us, that we see every day, that these are our friends and our neighbors. And when I considered it in that light, I guess I changed my mind. Money is a real problem in our schools. There are years when the spending cap does not pay for the increases of cost of living. The year that we increased bus transportation, it was over $1 million. I think it was quite a bit over $1 million. Having said that, that year, there was no extra money. There's no discretionary spending at the school because the budget eats up every bit of it. So how do you give the kids everything they need when you don't get a Cadillac when you're paying for a bus? You still get the bus, you still get the wagon when you pay for a wagon. And what I'm trying to say to you is, you have to pay for what you want. If you're not going to pay for it, it just won't be there. It's just that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrington. Privatization for the custodians?
Well, I guess for those of you in the audience who aren't aware, I'm the one who made the motion that we review the options that we have as regards privatization of custodians. I think that it is something that a responsibility, all the decisions you make on the board aren't easy. It's the kind of thing that we cannot continue to ask the taxpayers to give us money if we aren't willing to look at other options that we have available in the district. There's been quite a bit of time that's passed since that was originally made. I think that the situations have changed. Not as a cop-out, but we're in negotiations with AFSCME, and so I can't talk about it in a lot of detail. But I think there are some refined ways, some middle ground areas that can be explored that would allow us to meet somewhere in the middle. And I guess I probably shouldn't say any more than that.
Thank you. We understand as an incumbent you have some restrictions. Mr. Guarino, where do you stand on privatization of the custodians?
I'm against privatization of the custodians because education is expensive, and Nashua does a very good job at delivering a quality education at a premium price. We're 14th lowest cost in the state, some of the statistics that I was looking at. And our custodians, they work as a team with the teachers, and they're dedicated. They're there for years and years and years. My son did biddy basketball, and the custodians were there helping with the schools, making sure the schools were open, talking about these other issues, so that they're all related. It's about community. Custodians are in our community. They're our neighbors. I'm opposed to it because I think it's going to undermine the quality of the work that's done in our schools, and I'm opposed to it because I'm not going to save a few dollars, by putting my neighbor out of work. So I'm sure there are other ways we can save money, but I don't think that's one of those ways.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to address that? Yes, Ms. Odens.
I voted to look at privatizing to see how much money we would save. And when I listened to the people who came to speak to the board, when I heard parents say, I cannot make it to work if I don't leave my child at school in the morning before the principal is there, I want to see the same person there that I know. I was fortunate. I was able to stay at home, but that rang a bell with me. We just can't do that. Also, I talked to people who worked in Manchester, privatized, they saw a difference. Also, the cost of the contract will go up, and I listened to Scott Cody, who is the Director of Plant Operations at Southern New Hampshire Medical Center, who used to be the Plant Operations Director, and he said to us in the ad hoc committee, he made the statement, he saw no improvement by privatizing that. It was in privatizing management is where you see the biggest change. So I'm against it.
Thank you. Haley, you have one? Thank you.
What is your plan to focus on the social, emotional, and mental health of our students?
All right. I don't know how you're going to do this in a minute and a half, though. So if you'd like to pick one aspect, what would you do in terms of broad policies, perhaps, or even specifics to focus on the social, emotional, or mental health of the students? And Mr. Jans, you're up first with that one.
It's a good one.
It is.
I think that they are so intertwined that you can't separate them. When you're looking at students in the classroom, when you're looking at students that are trying to learn a difficult subject, it is mentally exhausting. It can be emotionally exhausting. It can be a situation where there is a lack of understanding. The light just doesn't go on for some reason. That can make students crazy. It can get them upset. It can cause them grief that they take home with them. The problem is, how do we empower the teachers to be able to work with students that are having difficulty in the classroom understanding the materials? If we can give them better materials, give them better ways to teach, maybe have seminars on additional methodologies during the summer, they can bring these into the classroom and possibly help the students understand materials they might not otherwise understand, which would reduce some of that mental stress that they would be feeling.
Ms. Oden, you've been in the classroom. What would you say are some things that the board should do to help those mental, emotional, social needs of our students?
Well, we need professionals to help those students. We hear a lot about it at the high school. The high school guidance counselors and the psychologists are just out straight trying to deal with some of the emotional issues that a lot of these students come in with. And a lot of it has to do with what's going on at home. And when you look at that, a lot of it is the drugs that we're seeing in school. Last year, during the budget, I think there was a motion to cut two or three of our psychologists. When those psychologists came to the meetings and talked about how they work with students, we got emails from students who said the psychologists absolutely saved their life. If you could have read some of the stories that those students had, you know that we need more help in our schools for these students. They are just overwhelmed with the problems they're seeing at home. And we need professionals. Teachers can only do so much. They're not trained. We need trained professionals to help these kids. And it's real hard to say we need that because it's not classroom, but ultimately it does affect the classroom and it affects those students.
Ms. Raymond, what would you see as some things the board could do?
So I agree with Mrs. Oden. I think we need to make sure that we have the appropriate number of mental health professionals in the school, not just guidance counselors, but also school psychologists. I know that the Greater Nashua Mental Health Center comes into the schools for children who are needing counseling, and I think that's great. Most of those are families, though, that are self-referrals to Greater Nashua Mental Health and then get permission for the therapist to come in. I would love to see a little bit more collaboration with them and possibly the youth council to make sure that our students are getting the support that they need in a way that's convenient for both them and their families, and in a way that we can balance it with their schooling needs as well. One of the other things that I would like to see is on the policy side. We do have a policy that says that withholding recess as a punishment is discouraged. I don't think we should be doing that at all. I don't think that our elementary-aged kids should be having to sit out recess because they're having behavioral issues in the classroom that might be treated with a little bit more ability to get up and move. So I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see us making sure that we have sufficient paras to meet the needs of our kids.
Thank you. Let's shift gears a bit. Let's look at the academic aspects here. And we had some questions about improving student achievement, ensuring that students who graduate are either college or career ready. Thank you, Ben. And so do you see any new things that should be done, any things that should be done differently to get closer to that goal of all students who graduate being college or career ready? Ms. Scales, you get that first.
To help them be more college and career ready, it takes a great strategic plan, which Dr. Mosley is absolutely working with. The other thing is outside sources, our guidance counselors as well. Our guidance counselors really work hard with our children. I know they've worked with mine. I think we need more collaboration with outside sources as well. One of the most, I think, rewarding programs that they have going in the high school is called Running Start. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with it, but this particular program allows the students to pay $150 for credits in college. It allows them to take college courses while they're in high school. So that's one example. Another example is VLAX, which is used in conjunction with Southern New Hampshire University, which is called a dual enrollment. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's called a dual enrollment, and it costs $100 for the student to go to college during their time progressing in VLAX. This is a great source for students, so I would suggest more collaboration with outside sources, outside colleges, so that these students that have the aptitude to go to college while they're in high school are able to succeed and finish college earlier or while they're in high school.
Yes, and Ms. Timmons, same question. The academics, what might you change?
Okay, I have one kid graduating every single year in college, and that starts with the parents. It have to start with the parents. We can't allow parents that can't afford to have their children go to school. Even $150 may be too much money. However, we do have counselors. We do have people that come into the school that can show your children what to do and how to do it. We have all type of support systems for these kids, and to have a person pay $150 it might be asking a little too much for that person to afford to go to school. However, collaboration with the parents, the teachers, and the counselors, that's the way to go. I do have one child that went to school, graduated last year, and he didn't see the counselor for the whole year. I was like, well, what's going on? He said, well, every time I went to see the counselor, she was busy. We may need more counselors if that's the case. However, that's the way you need to go. You just can't say, okay, it's $150, you can go. Sometimes they may not be able to get in there. But right now, the parents have to be 100% involved in that child education and the ability to go on to the next level.
Ms. Ziem, and then I'll get back to you.
I don't believe we have the resources in the school.
I think you may have to lean forward.
Oh,
thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's
Keep
all right.
reminding me. I don't believe we have the resources in the school to do the job that I think most of us would like to do. It's expensive. It's not inexpensive, and anybody who and constantly we are faced with, which do I cut? You know, do I cut the psychologist or the guidance counselor? And for me, it's always been classroom. Keep the classroom small. You can't, when you have 44% poverty, which is what we have in our schools, that means that you have 4 people living on $20,000. Could you live with 4 people? I couldn't live on $40,000. It just blows my mind how you can live with that kind of poverty. And these kids come to school. We have food pantries and clothes closets, and we have those things for a reason. But I would ask you all to look at my record, to look at my votes, because I have consistently voted to keep the guidance counselors, to keep the psychologists, to keep the social workers, I've done everything in my power to support the food pantries and the clothes closets. So I would just, sometimes you have to do less than you want to, but hard decisions do have to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another student. No, I'm sorry, I didn't see your card, Mr. Farrington.
That's okay.
Excuse me.
I still get my 60 seconds.
Yes, you do.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes.
Please.
What is your plan? No, it's not that one.
To graduate on time and...
Yes,
and
no, it
be-
was what can be done to improve student achievement? What could be changed in programs so that all graduates are either college or career ready?
Okay. From back on the last time I was on the board, money is important in this and all, but I think the one thing that we can do that doesn't cost money is raise the expectation you have for your students across the board. I understand there are students that have difficulties and we need to address those, but we're seeing no progress or very little progress in any of our standardized test scores. If you look at our test scores in the first through 4th or 5th grade in math, and they're running about 40%, and then they begin to trail off when they get to middle school. We have people who can analyze that data and start to point out areas where we can make some improvement. I come back to my point earlier. third grade is a key pivotal point. We've got to get these kids on grade level in reading and math in third grade. Can you imagine the discouragement, the disappointment of a child, fourth grade, fifth grade, who's reading on second and third grade level? He or she wants to keep up with her peers, but her peers are continuing to move ahead, and they are falling farther and farther behind. Rather than spending our time on remediation, I'm sorry, I missed it, never mind.
Thank you. Another question? Oh, all right. Wait. Ms. Zine, yes.
I think it's wonderful to have high expectations, and certainly that's a good thing. But for that child who comes in hungry and tired and anxiety-ridden, for the little first grader who came in and she had found her mother dead on the floor with an overdose, it's not about expectations. In the case, they need more than just high expectations. They need, our teachers are mothering a lot of these kids. They just are. And so I think high expectations is good, but I also think we need all of those other services, and they need to be increased. Thank you. I got the 30 seconds.
Thank you.
How can Nashua attract and retain the best teachers?
And we're starting with Mr. Farrington on this one.
Wow. Once again, I don't want to beg off on the question, but we're in negotiations with the teachers. I think that the way you do it is you provide support for them. It's been mentioned here tonight. We spend a lot of time and money on professional development, and we need to do that. We need to provide them with the availability of proper resources, but they need to be compensated at a competitive rate, and that is an issue that I really can't get into too much here. But we do need to keep our quality teachers. It's not good business. We hire people, we bring them in, we keep them here for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. We invest a lot of money in them, in their development, and then we lose them. So you can look at it from an educational standpoint, or you can look at it just from a fiscal or financial standpoint. It's not good business to invest money in your people and then lose your best people to other districts.
All right, thank you. Let me just remind people to turn off their phones if they didn't do that already. It does get picked up by the microphones, and this is being taped for broadcast on Access Nashua. Mr. Guarino, how do you think we can attract the best teachers?
It's not always about money. It's about working conditions. It's about what teachers do every day. We have a para shortage, so teachers need support in the classroom. Professional development is another issue. I was looking at there's a survey about teachers and job satisfaction. Some teachers in some of our schools have really high job satisfaction, and the culture is really good. And there are other schools that there's a difference. The working conditions aren't that great. The board has to be in touch with what teachers do every day and what students and teachers go through every day. There can't be a disconnect there. And so there has to be a lot of communication in that. And Dr. Mosley, I went to Muffins with Mosley, and he's working on governance, and he's trying to improve the culture, and I think that's great. And the strategic plan also is a good start too. So.
Thank you. And Mr. Jans?
I'm listening
Ditto?
to wonderful comments.
Okay.
And I'm listening to everything that I would want to hear. But I'm going to add a little bit to it, and I'm going to say that teachers in this town do a good job. We need to stand behind them and support them, which means additional resources when possible. It means giving them better materials. It means giving them newer ways to teach, giving them the freedom in the classroom possibly to vary off a hard and fast curriculum so that they're not teaching to an exam, they're teaching to comprehension. Once the kids understand the materials, their test scores will go up. And I know that teachers want to do that. I know that they want their children to understand more than just teach to a test.
Well, this is your last card.
I know,
There
it's
you
my
go,
last
Miss Ziem.
one.
Go ahead.
You'll see blood running down my cheeks. But I have to say, and I think what I'm saying is public knowledge. It certainly was said at one of our board meetings. In our district, we have a problem with our middle teachers, those teachers who are not new and novices, but they're not at that far end. And those are teachers that we put a lot of money into. We've trained them. We've gotten them to where they're valuable, where they're great teachers. But we are losing them because they are also young parents, young families, and they have to pay for those bills for those families. And when you're going to get a $12,000 raise in 1 year because you go to Amherst or you go to one of those towns that has been consistently giving pay increases to the accepted level of, then you're going to go. If I were a young parent and I had to support my family, guess what? As much as I love Nashua, I might have to do what was best for my kids and put bacon on the table. So I think that you're going to get what you pay for in this life. And I wish it wasn't true. I wish I could make miracles. I don't walk on water. I'd like to, though. Thank you. I'll stop.
Ms. Oden, that's all right. Ms. Oden raised her card.
We do have to have competitive salaries, and we have to provide good professional development for our teachers. With all the new initiatives, that's critical, and we're spending less and less money on professional development. We need to upgrade it. I was listening to a teacher the other day, and that's what their comment was. The level of professional development has gone down in Nashua, and that's an important part for teachers. Also, one of my colleagues, when I was at Amherst Street School, just left this district, went to another district in southern New Hampshire for a $16,000 raise. One of the teachers that spoke at our board meeting, a teacher left the district for a $17,000 raise. We're not talking about $3,000, $4,000. We're talking about a substantial amount of money, and there's a group of teachers that have suffered greatly because of what has happened with the teachers here in Nashua, and we have to correct that, or we're going to be losing more of our excellent teachers.
Thank you. We talked about career and college readiness, but we also have to be concerned with education for special needs students, for English language learners, and for our gifted students. So what are your thoughts on the district's current programs and changes you'd like to see to improve programs specifically for those three groups? Ms. Oden, it's your turn.
That's very difficult because when you look at it, special ed students usually come first because they're covered by the IDEA law, and there are legal ramifications, when they have an IEP developed, it becomes a legal document, and that has to be followed. In Nashua, we've done a good job of trying to provide as much education for special ed students rather than sending them out. A student can cost up to $200,000 if they're placed in a residential out-of-district placement. Our ELL students also come under some federal law. We have to provide for them. I think more ELL teachers might help. We do a good job, but we could be doing better with more teachers. And what was the other one? I'm sorry, you asked
Gifted students.
The gifted students. The gifted students we have done very little for. We had a REACH program at one time. That's been eliminated. We do have a curriculum coordinator in math who is dedicated to the advanced math, the accelerated math at the elementary level, but we certainly are not doing enough. The high school does a much better job because they have the AP courses for those students who are more advanced, and we do have the Running Start program that Ms. Scales talked about. Thank you.
Ms. Raymond, what did you see as the value of some of the current programs or improvements?
So I do think that Nashua is doing a good job at keeping our special needs students in their classrooms with other students. As Mrs. Oden said, it is extraordinarily expensive, to the tune of $600, $700, $800 a day to put a child in residential placement. So it's important that we keep them here. It's also important for their social, emotional development that they be around other kids. But we probably need more paras. And I think I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record on this. In order to meet the needs of all of our students, especially our marginalized students, we need to have the staff to do so. There are not enough paras for the number of students that we have. And our paras are, some of them are coming home with bruises, some of them are not getting a break time during the day. It's an exhausting job, and I'm sure they would like more support. Our English language learners have tripled in the last 10 years. We have over 300 English language learners now, and our staff has remained the same, which is, I imagine, exhausting for those staff and also for the students who aren't learning the way that they would like to learn. They would like to learn English. They would like to be successful. And as far as our gifted students, I think we're doing a fairly good job at the high school level. There's a number of programs. There's a lot of AP classes. But I haven't seen any identification in the elementary school.
Ms. Scales, same question. Current programs or improvements to them for those three groups?
So I haven't seen any programs either from the elementary and the middle school. However, as Ms. Oden and Ms. Raymond said, in the high schools there is the AP honors and AP courses as well as Running Start. And again, I'm going to repeat the VLAX because I think that's very important and it is very helpful for many kids who are able to work online and be efficient at it. Some kids, it's not for them, but for those who are able to work online and use VLAX, then they're able to go to college and they're able to move forward at a faster rate that's efficient for them. And many of them are not able to tolerate the classroom as well, so they take classes online. I think that's a very efficient, effective way to be educated, and I think it should continue, and it should be reinforced as well. I'm sorry. What was the other piece?
English language learners, or, well, I think you kind of covered the gifted students, so let's go to special ed or English language learners.
Oh, they're very special. I love them because I work with them. And they're very eager learners. They really are. I don't know if any of you have ever seen any ELL students, but they love to learn and they love to learn our language. Putting information out there in which they can understand, making it fun. They absorb the information, and they have a great time doing it. They're very intelligent. One of the things that I tell ELL students all the time is that if you can learn the English language, you can learn any language. And I let them know that they're very intelligent because they have the opportunity and the ability to learn 2 languages, and really anyone who can learn 2 can learn 5. They come from different areas in the world, and we have, I gotta stop. They come from many areas in the world, and they have to learn our language. They come with excitement. The only way to increase really is to increase the staff.
Thank you. We're going to take one more question before we do our closing remarks, and I'll let anybody who wants to answer that do it, but, after our 2 people. What is our final question, please?
A subcommittee of the New Hampshire State Legislature recently voted in favor of funding private education, including that by religious institutions. What is your opinion on this?
All right, this refers to Senate Bill 193. The Education Subcommittee did vote to recommend passage of a modified SB 193. It's not the same bill that was heard in the spring. It has been amended. But it includes, they don't like to use the word vouchers, but it's kind of a voucher system for parents who want to do homeschooling or send their students to private or even religious schools. So that is what this is referring to. And this is not something that your school board would vote on, but we have 3 or 4 state reps sitting here, so they might like to hear your answers. There may even be more. I just see these badges right in front of me. Ms. Timmons, you're first on that one?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's an underlying current to privatize public schools, and I disagree with it. I think our our taxpayers should not fund that type of program. I believe that we should keep our public schools public, and I do not believe in voucher programs. It's an undercurrent. And so therefore, I stand where I said it's a way to privatize and a backdoor way of getting rid of the public schools. That's my opinion on that.
Ms. Ziem?
It's multifaceted question. I personally have always been in favor of if you can do a charter school and that charter school is going to reach a group of kids on a level that they weren't reached in public school, then I'm not against it. But if the problem comes, if you're giving more to them per student than you are giving to the public school kids, now it becomes a problem. Isn't that discrimination? I mean, you can call it anything you want to, but in my view, if I'm paying X dollars plus for one student and X minus for another one, that doesn't balance itself. And too often in this country, we penalize the majority for a very distinct minority, and that doesn't make common sense to me. I think you look first at the overall good, the greater good, if you will, and you do your best for them that you can do. And then if you have enough money, but we don't have enough money in public school. I can tell you, I've been 12 years. Anything you want to hear about it, let me know. Thank you so much for listening.
And now, at this point, do any people want to use their cards? Yes.
I'd just like to jump in on this. We're talking about sending our tax dollars to a charity called the Children's Scholarship Fund. The Harvard University did a study on this a few years ago as it became more and more popular. And they found that 92% of the children who receive these scholarships go to religious schools. That most of those schools are less than 10% minority students, and that the scholarships aren't full scholarships. Most families continue to pay anywhere between $500 and $4,000 for their children to go there. So I have a lot of concerns about our tax dollars going to a private scholarship fund, but also about what kinds of kids are going to be able to take advantage of these. This is not your average family who is going to still be able to afford to pay $2,000, $3,000 a year to go to these private schools. So I'm opposed to it.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to weigh in? Yes, Mr. Guarino.
Yes, this is going to impact our property values, our property taxes, because they're going to be taking money that could have gone to public schools, and they're going to give it to a voucher system for schools. And education is expensive, and even the amount they give people is not really it's not really a great amount. So what they do at the state level often impacts us at the local level, and they're putting more burden on us.
Did anybody else want to?
Have I used this?
Yes, you did use your third card.
Blood.
Sorry. We're gonna. All right, I've lost control. Go right ahead, Ms.
I want to say I am a big Diane Ravitch fan. The research shows that charter schools on the whole do no better than our public schools. And this is only going to take money away from our public schools. If you go into our charter school here in Nashua, see how many students are in wheelchairs or come with their own nurse or are not speaking English. They have a very narrow population that they deal with. Charter schools on the whole, if you look across the country, they do not do as well as our public schools, and we will be losing money. Plus, I want you to know that in state adequacy aid, charter schools already receive $3,000 more for every child than our public schools. So please, this is not anything that will help us. It will only hurt our public schools.
And SB 193 doesn't really affect charter schools, but it does affect private schools, religious schools, and homeschooling. So the issue is very complicated. I'm sorry we didn't get a time to talk about charter schools. You want to weigh in? Go ahead, your last chance.
All right. I totally agree with this. Charter schools do not have the access to the special needs that our children may need, period. They don't. So if your child has difficulty learning, or they have any type of handicap, they're not equipped for it. So the monies that they receive, if it does equal what the public schools get, they're not servicing the child on the same level as the public school is. The other piece of that is once that money is given to the private school and the child is taken out, the monies are still there if that child is taken out a third of the way through the school year. Not that I mind the private school, the charter school. The problem comes when they cannot give the same services as the public school. No parent should have to pull their child out of a charter school or any other school because they cannot receive the services that the child needs to succeed. Any child, for that matter.
All right, thank you. Oh, yes, you've still got one. Go ahead.
My stance on charter schools, they cherry pick, and that's not fair. Most minority children are not in those charter schools. And when the charter school failed, they go right back to the public schools. And that's the problem with the charter schools. We need to keep our kids right here in the public schools. We pay for with our taxpayer dollars and not give any money to any charter schools or religious schools.
All right, thank you. And we're going to do our closing statements now. Again, we drew cards to see who would start first. And although I had promised I'd vary the order of speaking during the event, I couldn't keep track of that, I decided. But I will vary it on the closing statement. So, Mr. Guarino, you are starting with your 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you. My daughter had a science teacher at Elm Street Middle School, and I went to open house, and that teacher said that she treats each and every student in her class the same way she wants her son's teacher to treat him. And you cannot buy that kind of dedication. You cannot put a monetary value on that kind of dedication, that kind of caring. And those are the kind of great teachers that we need. So this election that we need and we want to keep. So this election is about what kind of school system you want to have, and ultimately what kind of city you want to have, because our school system, that reflects on the character of our city. So, and everyone has a stake in it. Everyone has a stake in our school system. Whether you have kids in the school system or not, it speaks to the value, the property value of your home. So that's why I'm running for Board of Education, and I hope you'll vote for me on November 7th.
Mr. Farrington.
We've been going this way all night.
I know. This is my one opportunity to vary it without getting confused.
Okay, well, it wakes me up. I'm really not sure what to say. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things this evening.
What didn't we talk about that you would like to talk about?
Well,
This is your
I don't want to open those doors. We've got,
Okay.
there are lots of issues. We've got multiple contracts we got to negotiate. We got to make decisions about Elm Street and renovations and all that, but we don't have time. So I guess first I want to thank you folks for putting this together. This is a great opportunity, and there's a nice turnout and some really good questions. I care a great deal about this and the children. And when I think about all this, I think I'll share this with you. I sat in an elementary classroom one day watching the teacher. She had broken the students up into reading groups. And they were moving, and they would keep, a small group would keep coming through that teacher. And I watched, and I happened to sit behind her, and she worked with one group, and then another group come over, and I'll always remember this little girl who said, as they were sitting down, I want to read the book they were reading. And she couldn't, because she wasn't on reading level. And she was an elementary student. Oh man, I got to stop. Okay. Please vote on November 7th.
Ms. Ziem?
It's been my privilege to serve the children of Nashua, and whether I win or lose, I will remain part of the heart of Nashua, because the heart of Nashua is part of me. I love Nashua. You're my family and my friends. I'm obviously from the South, but I have no family here other than the kids that I made here. and so you are my family. And so whether I serve on the school board or whether I serve on some other board, I will always be involved in Nashua and love every one of you. And I especially applaud you. Always, one of the things that has concerned me is that we don't have enough people who really get out and put their faith, I don't mean faith in religion, I mean their lifestyle, what they believe is important. They don't get out and fight for it. And obviously, every one of you here are doing just that. And so I commend you for that, and I look forward to seeing you on the battlefield. Thank you.
Ms. Timmons.
Okay, I'm going to read my closing statement. The Board of Education needs leadership and commitment. Commitment to our schools, our students, and teachers. Voting for me would ensure that your children will have a fighting chance. A chance to say, as my child said, I had a great public education. I'm asking for your vote on November the 7th.
Thank you. Ms. Scales.
Yes. Thank you, National Telegraph, for being here. Thank you, WV, for hosting this event. It's been very helpful, and I've learned a lot. I just want to say my name is Jamila Scales, and I am running for the Board of Education. I am the person who is going to absolutely fight for your child and work hard to make sure your students are well educated. I'm going to make sure those reading levels are increased within the next few years. I'm going to make sure that there's transparency throughout, just as Mrs. Timmons said. I'm thankful for all the opportunities that I've received through the public school. I'm thankful for the opportunities my children have received in the public school. If you're looking for someone to make sure that not only the students have a voice, but the parents have a voice in their education, and there's open communication, my name is Jamila Scales. I want to make sure these scales are even on both sides of the spectrum. Vote for me on November 7th. Thank you very much.
And Ms. Raymond.
Thank you. I appreciate the forum and everybody for coming out. This is my first time running for public office. I've been a civil servant my whole life, and I want to continue to contribute to my community. Like Mrs. Ziem, I'm a transplant to Nashua. Been here since 2010. My husband and I both grew up in families where education was important, and public education was the way that we got it. I would not have gotten music lessons if it weren't for the public school. I probably wouldn't have gotten AP classes or gotten to go to college and done some of the other things if it weren't for my public school. So I want my kids to have that opportunity, and I want to make sure that the kids who don't have voices here also have that opportunity. The kids that I saw while I was working as a social worker who don't have good home lives, who don't have anybody who speaks English, who come to school and that's their only safe place, and the place, frankly, where they get their clothing and their food. Thank you.
Ms. Oden.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. Recently, I went to a class reunion in Portland, Maine, and one of my classmates said, "Now, what did you do?" And I said, "Well, I taught." And I said, "Now I'm on the Board of Education." And he just shook his head, and he said, "Boy, that's a thankless job." And I said, "Well, no, not always." And when you see students that you have made a difference for when they're graduating, it's a thrill. But the hard part of this, the thankless part, is when it comes to the budget. You all have listened to the needs. We need more paras. We need to pay our teachers more. We need to better professional development, and when it comes to the budget, there is a finite amount. We have to look at the budget, and that's the really tough part. That is really thankless, and you've heard the needs, and when it comes to budget time, we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and the needs all are valid. So I hope you can vote to put me back on the board for another 4 years, so I can make those tough decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jans.
First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this forum. I'd like to thank the Telegraph for being here and reporting on it, and I'd also like to thank our local broadcast station for televising it. I'm going to wrap up my comments by referring back to the beginning comments. The Board of Education has to be an advocate, and it has to be an advocate for the schools, for the teachers, but also for the parents and the children. That is what we need to do. And we have to maintain foremost that we have a limited budget. How do we best use it to empower teachers to do the best job they can? And how do we make sure that kids get everything they need? I went to every parent-teachers meeting with my children all the way through school. I have to tell you, I have been impressed by every teacher I ever met in our entire school system. Fell in love with a couple of them, but I'm married.
Thank you. Usually I do a couple of quick questions, and we're very grateful to the library for hosting this event. And I was going to ask each of you about your favorite children's book, but I'm not going to do that. We're running out of time. I'm going to challenge everyone here to think about what their favorite children's book was, either when you were a child or what you might have read to your children or grandchildren, because I had fun thinking about that earlier. I do remind you that we have one more forum coming up on November 1st for the Alderman's race for Wards 1, 2, and 3. This will be taped, and it will be it's being taped. It will be available on Access Nashua. So we thank them for doing that. Tell your friends and family who weren't able to come that they'll be able to see it there within the next few days. And now I'm going to lift my ban on applause, because I think we all want to thank the candidates very much. Thank you. And do pick up a sample ballot on the way out if you didn't pick one up on your way in. Thank you for coming.